Hi, it's Victor Perton and welcome to the Centre for Optimism. And today I'm delighted that Alix Bradfield's new book, Energy for Life, is being launched today. Alix is a keen member of the Centre for Optimism and well loved. And today her book has been launched and the book is fantastic. It features interviews with 17 health professionals. And as you can imagine, I love it. There's a chapter on optimism, which focuses on some of the things that I've discovered through 2021 that will enable us to live better in 2022. Joining us for this celebration today, Sabina Read is a psychologist and the resident media commentator on 3AW and the 7 Network. Simon Davey is the founder of Happy Melon, a first of its kind studio that blends mindfulness with movement and has meditation at its core. And Ellice Giovanni, who is a postural movement and mobility specialist. It's a wonderful cast that joins us today, and you're very welcome to join us too. Alix, why did you write this book and who is it for?
All right. Well, I think in some ways it's for everybody, because the earlier in one's life you pick up some new beneficial habits, the better for us. The publishers decided it is for midlife and beyond, and that probably makes a lot of sense, because I think we can do pretty much anything we want with our bodies when we're young, until finally you get the odd ache and pain or digestive problems or something, and that's when people tune into what they can do. The reason I wrote it is because, as earlier, we have great respect for the medical profession. They help us in so many ways when something really goes wrong. My question to myself is, what can we do for ourselves to keep our bodies and mental state as in the best possible condition?
And another question I'd like to ask you, Alix, is, you know lots and lots of experts in the health space. How did you narrow it down to the experts who are selected in the book?
Oh, well, here are 3 today, so people get a good idea of how helpful they can be, and they've influenced me in ways that made a big difference in my life. So have the others. Dermatology, audiology for our ears, optometry for our eyes, so many different ideas to help us make the most of our miracle body, as Ellice points out.
Alix, there are so many great suggestions in this book, from diet to movement to meditation. Each of them probably involves adopting a habit. How hard is it to change habits? How hard is it to adopt a new habit? And what's your tip or trick for adopting one of the suggestions in the book as a new lifestyle habit?
We can change habits if we choose one simple thing that is maintainable, that we can do, that and Ellice has a ton of those ideas, and so does Simon and everyone in the book. So I think the secret or the trick is pick one simple thing that you think you can manage on a regular basis.
And an interesting feature in your life is your parents were once the oldest couple in Australia. So there was obviously something they were doing right in terms of healthy longevity. So what were they doing right, and how did their lives and spirit influence you, both generally in life and writing this book?
They did have a big influence on me. We are told, aren't we, that it is genetics that makes a difference in our health. Now, they gave me a different view on that, because my father died at the age of 103. My mother was nearly 107. Together, they were 206, which means they were the oldest couple in Australia at a given time. So genetically, no one in their family tree had anything like that longevity. And here's a tangent. This book is not about longevity. I don't think anyone wants to live a long life if, in fact, they're not fit, healthy, having fun, waking up in the morning, feeling good. So I looked at my parents and I thought, what is there about them that is not in their family tree? And there were some things that influenced me. they were very young in their way of thinking. They were always looking to what might be fun to do today or what they could plan for next week. They enjoyed little things. When they thought about the past, it wasn't to, oh, woe is me, you know, what's happening today? The past was so wonderful. They would just think about a happy thing that they'd done together or some people they used to know. So I watch that carefully. Also, as you get older, you lose the ability to do some of the things you've always wanted to do, you've always enjoyed. And they seem to think, well, if we can't do this, we can do that. My mother lost her sight. She loved reading. So she went to audiobooks, for instance. And all of that influenced me for sure.
It's well, a remarkable influence. So what are some of the tips in the book for those of us, you know, who want to learn more that remain top of mind for you? So what's your sage advice from the 17 experts?
All right. Well, this is a difficult question because there are so many tips in the book, including each chapter has so many tips. Let me just pick something simple. The optometrist has given a very good idea that we can all use. We're all stuck in front of our screens for many hours these days. We know that that's not good for us. It affects our eyesight. One simple thing we can do, he calls the 20-20-20. So every 20 minutes, when we're very involved with doing something on one of our screens, every 20 minutes, we look away at least 20 feet, which is about 6 meters, for 20 seconds. Now, basically, that's just saying, don't constantly look at a screen. Just look in the distance periodically. Give yourself a rest. I also like to combine that with advice that many people in the book have given, and that is keep moving. Even if you're not running a marathon, keep moving. So what I was doing, for instance, when I had to reread for the publishers all the chapters in the book, I would read a chapter, and then we're lucky we've got stairs in our house. So I'd go up and down the stairs a number of times. Then I'd come down and come back, or I'd do some of Elise's exercises. Then I'd come back and do the next chapter. Keep moving, keep your eyes moving, keep your body moving. So those are very simple things we can all build into our day that will make a difference.
Absolutely brilliant. And the question we always ask at the Centre for Optimism is this question behind me. What makes you optimistic? Alix, is it upbringing? Is it genetics? Is it choice? What makes you optimistic?
Oh, look, there's so many things. One is that I'm part of an iceberger group, and at dawn, I go down to the sea and meet friends. That makes, you watch the sunrise, how can you not be optimistic? And the other thing that makes me optimistic is watching how kind people can be to other people, especially to strangers. And I see that all the time. It's just not in our media.
That's brilliant. Now, those of you who are watching on Zoom, there's two functions at the bottom of the screen I'd love you to use. One is the chat function. So just tell us what you're thinking and what you're enjoying. And the other is Q&A. So I'm not going to get all these questions right. So we'd love you to throw some questions both at Alix and at our other experts. So Ellice, yes. Can I turn to you?
Sure.
One of the things you say in the book is we shouldn't expect miracles if we don't treat our body like a miracle. I just think that's so evocative, but do you want to tell us what you mean by that?
I've always had a different perspective on the body. To me, this is the most valuable piece of real estate we can own. And we've all been given like a house, a home, which is our body. It's a vessel on this earth. And it does some amazing things for us every single day. It's far better than our house at home. It has better television screens. It has, you know, air cooling and ducting and heating. It does everything you've ever wanted right inside of here. So for you not to think of it as a miracle, that it works so hard for you. And I always say your body works 24/7, 365 days a year, never having a break. So the least thing we can do is add some value into our house, into our home, what we live in every single day, so that it turns into our most amazing mansion that we can live within. So that's why I say, if you don't see this as a miracle, then it's really hard to find some perspective of adding value into this. And that's probably where a little bit of, that self-respect and self-love and self-value comes into it as well, because when you have all those things about this hardworking vessel and this, this home that you live in, you want to do the best thing for it every single day, and you want to give it the best choices, and you don't merely want to rent a space in it. You want to own and occupy this thing for the rest of your life.
I'm going to use some of those expressions. I just love the notion of the miracle. It's just brilliant. Just coming out of Christmas, of course, it's particularly evocative. So one of the things you talk about is joint mobility and using exercise to lubricate our joints. Now, I will confess, I've got a knee that lacks enough cartilage. So don't our joints just wear out as we age?
They don't specifically wear out. They do in the fact, if you come from your brain perspective, your brain has a mapping system for every single joint structure in your body. And if we only move in a certain way, day in and day out, and if you even think about walking and sitting and running, we've done those 3 movements since we were 3. So our brain knows how to do it. Our body knows how to do it. What we need to do is open up our mapping systems for our brain and give our brain a different view of what our body can do joint structure wise. So your joint structures, they move in lots of different ranges of motion. But say for an elbow, for example, if we only ever move it up and down, yes, it's kind of going to get an old mapping system, because if you accidentally move it in a different range of motion, your brain's going to think that might be a little bit of a threat response because this is dangerous. I haven't moved in this way. However, if you move your joints in all of different ranges of motion, lots of different movement patterns, then you open up that map in your brain and the brain goes, I've done this before. This isn't dangerous. I have a better understanding of my movement in my body. So the more range of motion that you can give a joint structure, the more lubrication that you will give it as well, because lubrication is what's called synovial fluid in your joint structures. And just like I always use the analogy of a door and a hinge, for your knee, for example, Victor, if you've got a sore knee, your knee's like a hinge on the door. And if you open and close that door for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 plus years, what's going to happen to the hinge on that door? It's going to rust. It's going to start squeaking. It's going to need replacing. But if you give it some WD-40 every 2 weeks or every, month, it's going to work longer and better for you. So that WD-40 is movement patterns to our brain, is lots of different maps and range of motions in that knee patterning so that it can get the lubrication and it can get better mapping for the brain.
Well, when I look at your website, and I've been following you on social media, there's lots and lots of great ideas there, including for my dodgy knee. But can you share with our audience, what is a simple exercise that will help our joints, and how do we create time in our schedule to make that a habit?
Yeah, any movement is good movement. What I try and teach people is you don't just want to move, as I said, in a single range of motion. So you want to move, like our wrist moves up and down, but you want to move it in a circle. You want to try figure of eights. Anything that drives new information to the brain will fire up new neurons in the brain, and therefore you'll have a better mapping system of the body, and you'll move younger and freer with more mobility in that body. So if you just take, for example, circles, figure of eights, and try and do those things to every joint in the body. Your hips, you can circle your hips. Your shoulder, you can circle your shoulder. You can try figure of eights. Like there are so many different patterns of movement that you can do. That's not just this that we've done since we were 3. So the more different range of motion, the better. And that's not necessarily doing cartwheels or doing, crawls on the ground or, random movement patterns that you can't do. It literally is just getting down to a joint structure and just moving it in circles or different ways that you haven't done before, because it will open up that map in the brain.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, look, everyone, you have to buy Alix's book and follow Ellice on her website and social media. One of the things I read recently, Ellice, some research from Israel on optimism, and that it makes a huge difference between the age of 85 and 95. So almost 7 years life difference as to whether you've got a positive mindset or a negative mindset. So, you know, what are the, as we look at that sort of, you know, very old people in their 90s, are these same exercises the ones they do as you're recommending to the rest of us?
100%, yeah. As we've all got the same joints in our body from when we were born to when we're 95, and we all should be able to move them in exactly the same way at any type of age, any ability. You know, if you've never moved before, or if you're an athlete, we should still be able to move our joints healthily the right way. So that's definitely something I learned, but it's I teach, but yeah, no age, there's no age gap that don't miss out on this type of movement.
Well, you're getting lots of positive responses. People are already doing your exercises and,
Yes.
and chatting about that. So, of course,
Sorry
the compulsive...
sorry to interrupt
Alex,
for just
go
a
on.
minute. The only thing that you say, Ellice, is the bursitis. I know someone with has a lot of bursitis at her shoulder at the moment. I'm not sure she's here today, but that is one warning. Is that, you want to say something about that? Just
so with bursitis, bursitis can be flared up if you overdo one range of motion continually over and over again, like swimming over and over again. But if you change that different range of motion to something else that you wouldn't normally do, that's still gentle, and just do it less reps more than more, always less is more in everything that we do, then that is fine for bursitis as well.
okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Brilliant. And of course, the question we ask each of our panelists and everyone watching is, what makes you optimistic, Ellice?
I believe we live on heaven on earth. So it's just the lenses that I put on every day. I get to choose to put whatever lens I want to put on. I get to, you know, walk around with the choice of taking in the world however I want to take it in. I get the choice of being around amazing people. I get the choice of, you know, bringing choices into my life or saying no to choices. And I think that's so powerful for someone's future, is to literally say, I have a choice to do what makes me happy, or what makes me excited, or what energizes me.
Absolutely brilliant. Now, there's some questions coming from the audience. We'll come back to those for all the panelists, but Narelle is one of the global leaders of the happiness movement, so she's got a great question for us. And Saeed has beamed in from Pakistan with a really good question on genetics. So we'll come back to those, but I'd like to turn now to one of my absolute favorite psychologists. Sabina is you know, she's a media star in Australia, the 3AW Macquarie, or what used to be the Macquarie Network, Channel 7 psychology commentator. And there's a secret too. She might be the daughter of our author today. Sabina, can you tell us, how does psychological issues affect our body and vice versa?
Well, thank you, Victor. And it's not a secret that Alex is my mum, because I shout that loud and proud to the rooftops. I wouldn't want to have a mum like Alex, so there's no secret there. So how does the way we think impact the way we feel? Is that what you're asking, Victor?
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, I think the two are so connected, and I often explain to people quite simply that the way we think impacts the way we feel, and the way we feel impacts the way we behave. And in the most sort of simple terms, if we're thinking thoughts like I'm not good enough, or I shouldn't be here, or I don't belong, or any of those unhelpful thoughts, then we tend to feel less than, or withdrawn, or we lack confidence, and our behaviour follows accordingly. If we're feeling those things, then we become smaller, we become quieter, we become and when we become smaller and quieter, we tend not to reach out to others. We don't share what we're experiencing. And that all stems from our thought processes. And, you know, a lot of the research suggests, and it's mixed research on this, but we have over 60,000 thoughts a day. Now, not all of those thoughts are going to impact deeply the way we feel and the way we behave. Some of them are that I've, you know, forgot to feed the cat and I didn't lock the door. Those ones may not get to us. But when you think that every day we're having thoughts that can change the way we think and the way we feel and behave, then really this is our most powerful source for energy and for connection and for positivity and optimism and vitality.
Absolutely brilliant. And Daddy Janki, who used to run the largest religious movement run by women, the Brahma Kumaris, used to talk about wasted thought, you know, the thought that doesn't help us. And as we're coming towards New Year, you know, a lot of people feel quite vulnerable, you know, they're sort of thinking about New Year's resolutions, or they're thinking, you know, why haven't I been invited to X party or Y party or the like? So how do we handle those feelings of vulnerability, particularly, you know, in the second half of our life?
Well, we need to welcome them, because every emotion, whether it's vulnerability or sadness or fragility or uncertainty, are, as in my mind, as welcome and as normal as those of joy and, you know, lightness and positivity. And I think sometimes we do ourselves a disservice when we kind of rank or judge, these are the good emotions, these are the bad emotions. We don't want to feel angry. We want to feel happy all the time. And I don't think that serves us well. So if we're feeling vulnerable, I say, welcome vulnerability. Thank you for coming to the party. And I know you're here for a reason. And let's talk, as opposed to slamming the door on vulnerability, because they all have a place at the table. And I think, you know, show me I'd love to meet a human who doesn't feel the spectrum of emotions. I've never met one yet. So that's the first thing, is I think to normalize and use our emotions as I think they're a signpost they're an invitation to explore, to be curious. Why are they here? What are they telling us? What can we do with them? And if we just ignore them, we're really ignoring a big part of ourselves.
So that's brilliant. So it's a lovely piece of advice to everyone, that welcome the thoughts, even the negative thoughts, because it tells us more about ourselves. And one of the things you talk about in the book, Sabina, is clarifying our values and our purpose has a lot to do with improving our levels of energy and well-being. Do you want to elaborate on that? Because it, you know, I find it quite vibrant, but it's not many people talk about it in that way.
Well, I think our values really guide us in life, and often we don't talk about them explicitly, and yet we know when they've been breached. We know when our values have been breached, we feel a sense of frustration or erosion or resentment, or something doesn't feel right. And so I think this is work we can all do, is to explore and really crystallize what our values are. And by values, I mean, what is it that matters most to us in our lives? And a good way, I mean, you can Google menus of values, and it's really a useful thing to do, because often when you see a value written down, you know immediately, yes, this one, connection, this is important to me, or growth, this is important to me. I know it is when I see it on a list. It speaks to me so loudly. Another thing we can do to help get in touch with our values is to think about times that have been really challenging for us in life, and what was it within us that helped us navigate that hardship or that difficult time or that hurdle. And often when we go back to ways we've navigated tough times, we find that is our values that have risen to the fore, that have helped us navigate through that. So that's, instead of looking outward thinking, I need someone else to tell me what my values are, look within to think what's helped guide us. So for me, as an example, connection is one of my top values. And I know that when I'm in a difficult time, it's more important than ever for me to connect to people, to share, to explore, to listen, to learn, and to be listened to, and to be seen, heard, not seen, but to be heard. So that's just a personal example of a top value of mine. Yeah.
Yeah, and I once recently a school principal was, you know, bemoaning values in his newsletter, and I rang him and I said, look, you've actually got a values committee at the school, and the kids are actually doing wonderful things for refugees, etc. You know, the values aren't just a poster on the wall, they're values in action. And we see that in you, Sabina, and we see that in Alix, and earlier we were talking about Alix's parents being, you know, the oldest couple in Australia. And, you know, you being on the media, you know, there's a lot of questions that come to you about relationships.
Yes.
And so what's one of your suggestions for handling the differences in our relationships? It's all very well to be cozy and cuddly, but when we've got differences, how do we handle them?
Well, I know my grandmother, Dagmar, Mum's mum, used to say, well, she likes a man in uniform, but I don't know that that's the answer for all of our differences. And we can't all marry a naval officer, so we can't all have a man in uniform, although it worked for them for, you know, 7+ decades. But I think one of the things that may be a top tipper in the relationship space, and I'm the first to put up my hand to say I'm still working through this myself. It's easy for me to report best practice and what the research says and then go and, you know, fumble along in my own life. So I do, that's my caveat. But I think it's about how we navigate repair. And by repair, I mean what happens after a period of conflict in a relationship. And again, like I said, find me an individual who doesn't feel the gamut of emotions, will show me a couple that doesn't experience conflict. And in fact, for me, and I do see couples in my clinical work, it's a red flag if couples come in and say, we never fight. No, we just never fight. Then there's probably something there that there's a fear of being, you know, vulnerable or present or really deeply connected. So it's easier to move in this sort of parallel universe from each other and then say we don't fight. We all have some kind of conflict in our relationships. And I think the couples that do best often know how to initiate repair. So that means after a fight, after a disagreement, after a difference, who is going to be the first person to lean in and say, that didn't go to plan, or that's not how I meant it to land, or can I try that again, or I'm sorry that you know, hit you in a way I didn't want it to. And that gets the ball rolling. And it's a hard thing to do because the little child that resides in all of us wants to say, screw you, or I'm right, or don't come near me at this point, or I need to protect myself because I'm now feeling attacked or not good enough. So it's a choice. Ellice talked about a choice, and I know that Sai will talk about choice too, and as does Mum and you, Victor, that it's a choice when we sort of put up our hand to initiate that repair.
Yeah, look, you see it in politics, you know, the journalists invite politicians to insult each other. And then they think, oh my God, how could I have said that about someone I actually really like? And, you know, there's great antipathies from those interactions that occur. Now, the last question for you, before the audience asks you any questions, Sabina, is what makes you optimistic? Is it mindset? Is it upbringing? Is it family?
So for me personally, what makes me optimistic is seeing every single day the capacity in other humans to be compassionate, to be connected, to be joyous, to be tender with each other. And often it's in these small moments with people who I'll never meet again, or perhaps I've never even spoken to, but I just witness it, you know. It could be a couple walking down the street holding hands, or it could be someone offering kindness to another human, you know, crossing the road or with their animal, whatever it is. And I think I always say, Victor, that we've all got a set of antennas on our heads, and clearly you can't see them, but it's, if our antennas are looking for the compassion, the wisdom, the tenderness and the joy in others, then that's what we see, and that keeps me optimistic, regardless of the, you know, whatever challenges we're going through at any time. It's the human capacity to love, to connect and to give to one another makes me optimistic.
Oh, absolutely brilliant. That's a masterclass in optimism. And there's a message from Rod Wade, who must be up in his pajamas too, because he's in San Diego, and he says, after 33 years of marriage, we're still working at it. And I agree, how you reconcile is critical. So there's another expert. Simon, can I turn to you? What is your personal mantra about stress?
Yeah, it's one around busyness. So I come from a very small town in New Zealand, and about 10 years ago I moved over to Melbourne. And you take a Kiwi boy out of New Zealand and put them in the middle of a big city, you quickly feel the rat race and how busy things become quickly. So I came up with a little mantra, which is busy as a reality, pausing as a necessity, stress as a choice. And just breaking that down a little bit, the busy component of that, I truly believe it's a choice. If you don't want to be busy, you can live out in the mountains, you can declutter your life. But we choose to have full-time jobs, we choose to live in cities, we choose to have families and things that create the busyness. This middle part, which is pausing as a necessity, I truly believe that. I think that can look very different to everyone. It can be meditation for some, it can be yoga for some, it can be walking the dog around the park for others. But knowing yourself well enough to know how to slow down and to fill up your cup and look after yourself, that pausing component then lets us choose whether we feed into that stress response. So stress as a choice is quite a contentious thing to say potentially, because the stress response is one that's an automatic one. But I really believe that it's evoked too quickly these days to stimulus that don't necessarily need the same stress response that it's given. So that choice piece in the middle, the more we get to know ourselves, the more we slow down, the more we know what makes us tick. That creates space between something happening and us responding. And that stress response, as I was saying before, was there to protect us. It was there to be, if we're in true danger of a tiger or whatever example you want to use, that fight response was there to protect us. But nowadays, that's evoked at the split second. If you're stuck at lights late for a meeting, you feel that blood pressure rise, you feel your heart rate rise, you get clammy potentially. All these visceral body responses start happening that don't equal the level of risk to your body or to you in that moment. So getting rid of the pretense that busy is the problem. I truly don't think busy is the problem. You can live a really full and busy life as long as you know how to pause and make sure you can slow down and connect with yourself to be present with where you are. Then you get the choice whether you feed into that stress response or not.
No, that's brilliant. I think one of the things is I've got older, I've got so used to traffic jams. They just don't worry me, and people doing crazy things on the road in front of me, you just say, oh, well, must be part of that half of people who do crazy things. One of the things you talk about in your contribution to the book is complete and overall fitness. Do you want to tell us what you mean by that? It's just such a lovely expression and evokes so much. And what do you mean by that, Simon?
It's a lot to do with the emphasis that we've put on our physical well-being for a long time. And it's been decades and decades of knowing that moving our body is good for us, doing fitness classes, keeping ourselves active, and all those things. We invest a lot of money and time into our physical body, which is wonderful. And you should keep doing that. But there's an imbalance in the priority that we put on our mental health. And that when I'm talking about overall wellness and overall fitness, you can't forget about that piece of our mind. And if there is a disconnect between those two, our physical body and our mind, that's when there's potentially going to be some chronic illness pops up. And therefore, having some balance and knowing that the time you put into your mental health and your well-being is just as important, if not more, than going for a run, going to a Pilates class. And don't stop doing this one because you're going to do this one more. Do them together. And that's why the Happy Melon model was in terms of doing a little bit of cardio, doing a little bit of Pilates, doing a little bit of yoga with meditation, sort of the common thread throughout. That's when the magic happens. So just stressing your body in different ways physically with the pretense of coming back to yourself and calming yourself down with your breath.
And I almost get shivers down my spine. It's so brilliant. I remember reading a piece the other while ago that said, you're meant to walk at least half an hour a day. And the advice was to do 10 minutes after each meal, because inevitably you'll go more than 10 minutes. but you get that life benefit. And the 1 minute meditation, you know, that the Brahma Kumaris recommend, and I wear an Apple Watch, you know, every hour. It's reminding me to do that 1 minute.
Totally. It doesn't need to be 2 times 20 minutes in a day. It literally, the more in tune you get with your breath and the practice of meditation, it can be closing your eyes and listening to 3 breaths. I know if I can start to feel myself feel a little bit stressed or something, if I just take a moment and feel 3 deep breaths, it changes things. And I think that the difference is if you don't have these practices and things, that the tools to pull on in those moments of stress, you just get a little bit stressed, and then you get a little bit more stressed, and then it just keeps on piling up.
Simon, why don't we do 3 breaths?
Why don't we do? I can lead you through 3 breaths.
Absolutely. Breaths now. Go on.
So wherever you are in the world, this is a mini snapshot of a meditation, but if it's a first experience, it'll be a nice, gentle one. So do you want to close? If you feel comfortable, close your eyes. And before we do our 3 breaths, just allowing the shoulders to soften. And then gently starting to deepen the breath. So taking 3 nice full breaths in through the nose. And letting go. 2 more times. Seeing if you can start to take slightly deeper breath on the last one. And back into the body.
Oh gosh, Simon, that was fantastic. I think, oh God, we'll have to get you to come back and do longer meditations with us. That
anytime.
You're a great leader of meditation. Now, one of the things you say in the book is everyone is doing the best they can. And I love that expression. Everyone is doing the best they can. So how does that help us in the second half of our lives to lead a good and healthy life?
It's a great question, Victor. And I truly believe it. I truly believe that everyone's doing their best. So one of our value statements, or something that's quite close to me as well, is exactly sort of as you said, that we believe that, or I believe that everyone is doing their best in each individual moment with the tools they have. And again, sort of breaking that down a little bit, it doesn't mean that people are going to be at their best in each moment, but it accepts that there's an accumulation of things that happen. And if you can trust that everyone's doing their best, even if it's not something you agree with, but you trust that they're doing their best in that moment and genuinely want the person to be well, there's real room for healing. And it's not an easy thing to practice. And I think, especially probably in the last 18 months with everything that's going on, it's not always easy to practice this, but I promise you that the harder it gets to practice, the more powerful it becomes. So if you see people that are really acting out, if you trust that they're doing their best with the tools they have, and that piece of that statement's a really key one as well, because we don't know what personal development they've done. We don't know what anything they've done prior to something happening. So trusting that they're doing their best in that moment with the tools they have, and wishing that person well, and the wishing that person well component is, to me, about seeing people and seeing things that people are acting out as suffering, and wishing them to suffer less, and seeing the human being behind that action and wishing them well. Because I truly don't believe that anyone's getting up in the morning wanting to be annoying, difficult. I think that there's a number of events that will happen before something that the reaction, that's the reason that it's happened. And we've spoken a bit about choice today, and I think that's where there's some real power, is choosing how to respond to someone else's reaction. And that's where you can shift quite a lot. So if you can choose to be kind, regardless of what someone else does, that can shift quite a lot.
You have to be a saint to do that all of the time, but it's wonderful advice. And my last question to you is again that question. What makes you optimistic, Simon? Is it your meditation practices? Is this that notion of everyone is doing their best? What makes you optimistic, Simon?
It's a lovely question again, Victor. And personally, I think it's a bit of my upbringing initially. I think I've just, throughout my life, always had this piece of it's going to be okay. No matter sort of how difficult things get, I've just had this like deep-seated feeling that it's going to be okay. And coming back to that, even again, the last 18 months and have not been easy for anyone, but I truly believe we're going to be okay. And we're still a little bit in the thick of it at the moment, but I actually believe we're going to be better off for it in the long run. That there'll be things that come out of this experience of knowing where you want to spend your time, who you want to spend your time with, things that are important to you in your life are becoming more apparent. So that's one piece of how I stay optimistic is trusting that things are going to be okay. And then another piece that I come back to is that knowing that everything changes and shifts as well, even if you're feeling one way in 1 minute, knowing that that's not going to be the way that you feel forever, just as much as you can't maintain a high level of happiness forever, that's unachievable. But same way that if you feel really sad or something, that's not going to be there forever either. So knowing that nothing's going to stay constant is another nice way of being like, okay, yes, I feel this now. I can recognize and acknowledge that, but it's not going to be what I feel like forever. And then reiterating what the rest of the panel have said tonight, around choice, around mindset, I think mindset is so strong. And where you put your thoughts is where your energy goes. And if you fill up that cup of things are not going well, things are getting tougher, that is going to get pretty full quickly. Just as easily, if you can catch yourself and start to say, actually, we've got food on the table, we've got friends, family, whatever it is, that sort of gratitude bucket is just as easy to fill, and it's a really powerful one. So mindset's a really strong one. And I think through meditation and mindfulness and things and getting to know yourself better, you can switch from those ones a little bit faster and remind yourself that things are actually going to be okay.
That's brilliant. I think of the English mystic Mother Julian of Norwich, who lived through the Black Plague, so roughly 700 years ago, who said, all shall be well, all shall be well, all manner of things shall be well. And then you move forward to John Lennon, who said, if it hasn't worked out, it's not the end. So I think you synthesize that great body of wisdom. So look, we've got some questions from the audience, and Narelle Lemon is a professor at Swinburne University, and she's also the Australian head of the Happiness Movement. And so this is to each of you panel members. Do you have any intentions or mantras you tell yourself to realign yourself back into being present and optimistic for life? Alix, do you want to give that a go first?
I haven't thought about this before, but I know what I do is just say, how important is this in the scheme of things? You know, is this life and death, or is it something that will pass? And I, come back to a more optimistic way of looking at something, unless I'm really stressed and upset about something. And then I like to talk it out with someone, or I like to go for a walk, or, do something physical.
Ellice?
Yeah, one of my sort of, I guess, mantras you can say is, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So that kind of means change your patterning, if you're always doing the same thing, you're going to get the same result. So if you want to, go for a walk, but instead of just doing your power walk, actually go for a mindful walk instead, like change your pattern, change your direction, just change something different and you will get a different response.
Brilliant. Simon?
So can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So if you guys want to click on the QA button at the bottom of the
sorry, I
screen, you
should
can
have been.
see these written questions. So
Intentions
Narelle
or
asked,
mantras?
do you have any intentions or mantras you tell yourself to realign yourself back into being present and optimistic for life? It's a tough question.
Another great question. I think what I've learned to do is the practice of mindfulness is a really powerful one of taking in what's around you. It's very easy to get distracted and be in that busy state again. So I'll catch myself every now and again and just take in what's around me, whether that's sounds, whether that's nature. But I think the ability to be present, and to be honest, now I'm thinking about it a little bit more. This is a really interesting piece of technology that if I can not be attached to that a little bit, that's a big help for me. So I think if you can switch off from your phone and go for a walk or something, it's a really powerful tool as well.
Yeah, brilliant. And Sabina?
I'd like to come back to this, I guess what I would call scarcity versus abundance thinking. And when I'm feeling overwhelmed or like too much is going on, I do like to come back to think there's enough for everyone, whatever that is, whatever it is I'm needing at that time, whether, and maybe sometimes it's enough time. There's enough time, there's enough peace, there's enough quiet, as well as, enough resources. And you can hear some people talking more through the scarcity mindset of sort of with a rigidity of holding on, and there's a lack of, and there's a fear-based thinking that comes from that. So I think that's one thing for me. It's funny, Sai just held up his phone. I didn't, this is not one I prepared earlier, but he just happens to be sitting next to me. And I think a four-legged, I've got two of them. I've got a border collie, but she's not here. But they are the greatest reminders and recalibrators of being present, because they're not saying, well, what happened yesterday and what's happening tomorrow. And I like to, in my mind, picture a timeline. And how do I bring myself back to here is to remind myself that what's happened before now doesn't need my energy, and what's going to happen from here on may not need my energy either. And in many ways they hijack us. That's the what ifs of the future and the regrets of the past. And animals are a wonderful teacher because they are just here, just now, like Chino.
Absolutely brilliant. Now, Saeed has joined us from Pakistan, and he's got a great question for us. Saeed, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, sir. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Alex. How are you?
Hi, yeah, terrific. Good to see you.
Same here. I mean, it's a great pleasure to talking to you. My question is, are these genes or the personal choices which determine the physical and mental health? What do you advise on this?
Okay, well, I think what everyone is saying here today is, yes, genes have an effect on us, body and mind, no doubt. But our choices perhaps have more power to, in terms of nature and nurture. They go together. They're both important, but we do have choices. I'm certainly not fatalistic about genetic predispositions at all.
I see. And the other thing, what are the sources of energy and what are the killers of energy sources? What are the killers? I mean, especially in most of the millennials or the young people, they are going for energy drinks. Are they good for the health?
Yeah, I would say no. I would not be. And Martin asked a question. Hello, Martin. You asked a question earlier about nutrition. Now, I wish I could speak about all the chapters in the book, but there just isn't the time in this book launch to do that. One chapter is certainly on nutrition by a naturopath who also helps people who are going through oncology issues. So he helps them, and he works with the doctors to help them to tolerate chemo and radio and various things. But he has lots of views on how we can all be more energetic through nutrition his views are eat more plants, which is something we can all do.
Brilliant.
You've got a different view. Yes.
Well, Martin is Scottish, so you know it's haggis, which is there any meat
right.
in a haggis, Martin?
So plants will kill you. There are more carcinogenic elements in plants than any other species in the world.
Scottish whiskey and haggis is the diet. Now, let me introduce you to the others. Martin Gillespie runs this fantastic movement out of Sydney, but it's global for men's health and particularly their emotional health, and does a great job. And you've got a question for the panelists, Martin.
Yeah, look, I think it's been a terrific chat, and I'm looking forward to your book, actually. And thank you for explaining the connection between Alix and Sabina. I didn't know that beforehand, so I'm going to remember that in the future. Brilliant. Every single day, we have the opportunity to feed ourselves the proper food that can go into our guts. And we are in control of over 35 trillion cells in our body. And if we feed them properly, that's going to have a massive impact on our well-being, our metabolic health, and all of the things that Sabina discussed and what Simon mentioned, and movement. Now, one of the key things that I would say, and it's funny actually, Alix, you mentioned about oncology. I'm a cancer survivor. I had stage 4 cancer 9 years ago. I'm also a carnivore. I have not had a vegetable or fruit in over 15 months. And I also, actually, Victor, here's the other thing. I haven't had any alcohol in over a year. So when you look at, you mentioned also, Alix, around dieting, take the first 3 letters of the word diet, die. Take the first 4 letters of the word health, heal. So every single day we can heal our bodies, mind, and spirit with what we put into our gut, which is the central part of our being, and feeds everything upwards rather than downstream.
So, Martin, what is the question?
So the question is, how much value do you guys put on nutrition as a daily source of energy?
Ellice, do you want to go first?
Yeah, a massive amount. Our brains need, 3 things. They need fuel to work our body. They need oxygen, they need energy. So a lot of that comes from what we consume, but not only what we consume, I think we forget as well, nutrition. I've done a video of this before, but you can consume color not only through your diet, but through vision as well, what you actually put in and see. So nutrition is a massive one, but there are so many other things to it as well. For me,
Brilliant.
anyway.
Brilliant. And Simon, do you want from your perspective?
Yeah, nutrition is a huge element to health. And the only thing I'd add to that is, and I hope they do more research in this space, is that it's a lot harder to absorb and to function when you're in a state of stress. So it's almost like how what you're putting into your body is going to have an effect dependent potentially on how you're feeling in that moment. If you're really stressed and stuffing food down your mouth and rushing off, that's going to have quite a different way of helping your body compared to if it's slow, if it's thoughtful, if you're calm when you're taking it in. So I think it's not actually just what we're putting into our bodies, but it's actually how we're thinking about the food that we're absorbing as well.
And Sabina, from a psych's point of view?
Yeah, well, I mean, I could build on what Si just said then, that and Ellice, it's not just what we eat, but how we eat it, which is how we think about food. A lot of us think about, we have different ways of thinking about food. Some of us literally see food as fuel. We don't really have a judgmental or a fraught relationship. It just kind of goes in and helps us keep moving. But for many people, food brings a lot of joy. For other people, food represents family and celebration and connectivity and milestones. And for others, it's a very painful relationship with food. And I think if we're not acknowledging our relationship with food, then it doesn't we can't ignore our relationship with food, even if we feel like we're eating good things. Good, I don't like that word. In fact, there's a wonderful book I could recommend if anyone's interested in our relationship with food called If Not Dieting, Then What? It's by Dr. Rick Korsman, and he's a Melbourne doctor. And he talks a lot about, and we've now all heard this, it's 20 years old, this book, sometimes foods instead of, junk food or bad food or naughty food. So particularly for those of us who are parents, although we're all parenting ourselves, so even if you don't have a little person, you've got your own little person to look after. And it's language like that makes a big difference. If we're saying that's a naughty food, then it becomes so loaded. If it's a sometimes food, maybe not so much.
Martin, thank you for that. Martin, thank you for the provocative question. I always think of the Argentinians and the Brazilians when you say that. Every time I've been in Argentina, they say cows are the things that eat vegetables to convert them to food for people. So absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Listen, we've come up to the hour. It has rushed past. Alan Gold again asked the question I asked her at the beginning. How does Alan get a copy of the book?
Oh, how kind. Well, it seems to be available wherever anyone gets their books, whether it's online or in a print version. However, some of the people are overseas, and I understand there is no printed version in other countries. I'm not quite sure why, but no printed version, but they can get it online.
Fantastic. So, Alix, as we end up, is there a final thought you want to share with our audience?
Oh, well, I'm just very grateful for everybody who tuned in, and the book has meant a lot to me. I'm very excited. It's actually happened. Here it is. It's actually happened. Very excited about it. And you've got your pre-release copy. I hope there are some ideas that help others. The sort of thing you can have on your bedside table. You might open it up and say, "No, that's not for me. I wouldn't do that." Oh, here's something. That's one little thing I might think about changing.
Brilliant. Ellice, a last thought to share?
Oh, I think it's been amazing. I just want to say congratulations to Alix. She's the living, matriarch of it all. Like, look at her. She goes for swims in the morning every day in the ocean, and she's vibrant, and she moves well, and she thinks well. And I just think to have an author like that, to have someone to put all of this stuff together, is someone you should be listening to.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Simon, a last thought.
Last thought, be kind to yourself and others. There is no better time to be practicing that. And just echoing what Ellice said, Alix, congratulations and thank you so much. It's been an honor to be part of this with you. And I think there's going to be so many wonderful tips and tools that come out of this. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you, Si. Thank you.
And to the daughter goes the last word.
Yeah, I mean, you asked Victor earlier what makes me optimistic, and I talked about, the scarcity and abundance and animals, but I was remiss not to say that you talked about what influence we have from our parents. Well, of course, I've been highly influenced by both my parents, and Mum really walks the talk. Instead of saying we should do this or we shouldn't do that, she just does it. And I think it's so influential to see someone who's tuning into themselves. And sometimes when we do that, it means actually resisting the collective pressure or perspective that we may have been raised with. To be able to tune into yourself and say, I have the wisdom and I'm going to follow the wisdom, even if it may not always be conventional or socially acceptable. So to kind of live like no one's watching is a kind of a good mantra as well, I think.
Fantastic. Look, everyone who joined us on Zoom, sending your messages. Alix, we're better than a bookshop. We've had people from Pakistan, from India, from San Francisco, from San Diego, from Africa, and of course, all around us here. So thank you so much for joining us and bringing Ellice, Sabina, and Simon along too. This concludes the formal proceedings.
We're most grateful to you, Victor, for having organized it all. You're the one who put it together. So thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Well, we hope you enjoyed joining us for the book launch, Alix Bradfield's wonderful book, Energy for Life. go out and buy a copy. Look, it's available where all good books are sold. So have a Google. When I've done that, it's available in lots and lots of bookstores. Energy for Life by Alix Bradfield. And we also love you to get involved with the Centre for Optimism. The website is centreforoptimism.com, and you can sign up for a free newsletter or just browse our materials, which includes the wisdom of Alix Bradfield. Have a great day.